My name is Sillin. I'm 34 years old, but half of this country doesn't know that name. They know me as C. Loran, the dancer who turned pain into movement, the woman who made stillness feel like confession, the face that drifts across billboards with silver paint and unreadable eyes. To them, I'm mystery and grace. To myself, I'm the ghost of a girl my parents buried alive. Tonight, after rehearsal, I found a letter waiting for me in my dressing room chair. White envelope, gold crest, heavy paper that smells of old money and stale perfection. The return address almost made me laugh. The Princeton Heritage Foundation, my father's latest vanity project. Inside, written in the language of polite desperation, was an invitation. Dear Miss Loran, it would be the greatest honor of our annual charity gala to host you as our distinguished guest and performer. Your presence would illuminate the evening and help our cause immensely. Please inform us of any special requirements. We are prepared to accommodate you in every way. At the bottom, 2 signatures, Charles and Evelyn Davenport. My parents. They don't know. They don't know that Cy Loren, the name whispered in champagne circles, the artist they would sell their pride to impress, is the daughter they erased 16 years ago. I sat there for a long time, letter trembling between my fingers, the paper slicing a thin white line into my palm. The irony was exquisite, almost theatrical. If I were writing this scene for the stage, the audience would hold its breath as the spotlight found my face, a smile not of joy, but of recognition. A predator finally seeing the door open. Oh, I thought I had buried the past in movement. Every performance, every standing ovation, every night I left the stage trembling with sweat and light. I told myself I had already won. But the truth? No ovation ever quieted the echo of their voices. Discipline makes you worthy. Don't embarrass us. You were supposed to be extraordinary. The night they told me I was no longer their daughter still plays in flashes. My father's voice cold as the marble floor. My mother's silence thicker than guilt. The suitcase they packed for me themselves. So I wouldn't take anything unearned. I left that house with one broken wrist and a heart that still tried to dance. And now, 16 years later, they beg for the presence of a woman who doesn't exist without that broken girl. They want C. Lauren, the untouchable, the graceful phantom. They want to buy a piece of what they once crushed under a tennis shoe. I can almost see them at their long dining table. My father rehearsing his host's smile. My mother adjusting the pearls that were once her armor. They have no idea that the performer they're praying to lure will walk straight into their shining little world carrying a mirror big enough to break it. I lay the invitation on the table beside my makeup brushes and the silver mask I wear for Nocturne, my newest piece. The mask stares back at me, expressionless and cold. It was never just a prop. It was a metaphor I carved with my own hands. When I dance behind it, people see only perfection, not the bruises beneath the paint. The letter feels heavier than it should, like a ghost trying to anchor itself to the living. I fold it, unfold it, fold it again. Each motion presses another memory loose from the vault I thought I'd sealed. I remember the court, the sun blinding white, the smell of sweat, dust, and disappointment. I remember his voice cutting through my exhaustion. Again. Again, Sillin. Until you stop being weak. I remember the crack, the bone giving way under the strain of obedience. The sound was small, but it split my life in two. That sound has lived in my choreography ever since. Every twist of my wrist, every arc of my body is a translation of that moment into art. Pain that learned to sing. I thought I had forgiven them, or at least outgrown the need for vengeance. But forgiveness is a quiet death, and I am not ready to die. The city outside my window hums with traffic. Somewhere, a siren wails. My reflection in the glass overlaps with the skyline, my face, my empire. Born out of exile. They cast me out, and I built a kingdom from the ashes. I run my fingers across the envelope again. They need me now? Their perfect facade must be cracking, perhaps donations fell. Or their precious reputation requires polishing with celebrity glitter. They always cared more about appearances than truth. I almost laugh at the symmetry of it all. The woman they tried to mold into a symbol of control will walk back into their world as the embodiment of freedom. My assistant Maya knocks gently before entering. You okay? She asks. She's young, 22, and believes I've never known fear. I hold up the letter. Guess who wants me at their gala? She reads the names, her eyes widening. Wait, aren't they? Yes. Oh my God, are you going to go? I pause. Of course I'm going to go. I can feel her studying me, trying to read the motive behind my calm. She doesn't know that calm is just choreography. When she leaves, I pour myself a glass of white wine and sit on the floor of my loft. The wood is cool under my skin. Above me, the ceiling is painted with fading stage lights, tiny stars that remind me of the theater's rafters. I let the silence stretch, then I whisper, almost to the ghosts, it's time. Not time for violence, not for shouting or revenge as they would imagine it, cheap and loud. No, my revenge will be art, measured, precise, inevitable. They built me out of pressure and humiliation, and I became a diamond sharp enough to cut them open. They tried to bury the dancer inside me under the weight of trophies and schedules. Now that dancer will take the stage again, this time in their world, on their dime. I imagine the gala, chandeliers like frozen rain, the echo of laughter polished by money, the endless parade of handshakes and compliments. My parents will glide among them, perfectly rehearsed. And then, when the music stops and the spotlight turns, they'll see me. First as C. Lauren, the star they crave. Then piece by piece as Selin, the daughter they disowned. I will not scream. I will not accuse. I will simply tell the truth. And that truth will be the one thing they cannot buy, cannot silence, cannot outshine. I press the letter flat on the floor and trace the embossed crest with my thumb. The gold catches the light, gleaming like a wound. It occurs to me that maybe they do suspect. Maybe some subconscious part of them recognized my movement, my name, the way I always hide my wrists in long gloves. Maybe this is their twisted attempt at reconciliation. But even if it is, it doesn't matter. There can be no reconciliation without acknowledgement. And they've never acknowledged anything. For years, journalists have asked me why I never speak of my family, where I studied, what my real name means. I always smile and say, some stories dance better than they tell. They think it's poetic. They don't know it's literal. I close my eyes and let the memory of my grandmother's voice wash over me. Soft, low, smelling of chamomile and rain. One day, Selin, you'll understand that the best revenge is living your truth where everyone can see it. She died when I was 25, but she lives in every motion I make. She is the rhythm in my ribs, the whisper that steadies my breath before the curtain rises. I think she would smile at this letter. I think she would say, now you're ready. The wine tastes like metal. I pour the rest into the sink. Outside, New York keeps moving, oblivious, merciless, alive. I open my laptop and begin drafting my reply. To the Princeton Heritage Foundation, it would be my pleasure to attend your gala. I look forward to sharing the evening with you. Warm regards, Lauren. Simple, elegant, deadly. As the message flies into the ether, I feel something shift inside me, an old door unlocking. For 16 years, I've built walls of choreography and applause around the wounded girl inside me. Now she stirs, stretching her limbs, remembering the taste of sunlight and rage. I stand, walk to the mirror, and strip away the remnants of rehearsal, powder, glitter, the paint of someone invincible. Beneath it all, I see her face. Mine. Not C. Lauren's, not the mask or the myth. Just Silent Davenport, the unwanted daughter. And she is smiling. I'm coming home, I tell her reflection. But not as your victim. The city hums indifferent as I turn off the lights. In the darkness, my resolve feels clean, almost holy. Tomorrow the rehearsals will continue. Movement, precision, control. But now every gesture has a new meaning. Every step a direction. The invitation lies on the table, catching the moonlight. It no longer looks like paper. It looks like a stage. and I already know the choreography. I don't remember the first time I held a tennis racket. I remember the first time my father decided it was the only thing I was allowed to hold. I must have been 5. The racket was almost as tall as I was, heavy in my small hand, the grip wrapped in white tape that smelled like rubber and money. We were on the court behind the house, the one the landscapers called the crown jewel of the property. The lines were freshly painted, the net perfectly taut, the clay smoothed to a flawless, false perfection. "Hold it like this," my father said, adjusting my fingers, tightening them until my knuckles turned white. "Firm. Not like you're afraid of it." I was afraid of it. I was afraid of him even more. He knelt down so we were eye to eye. Everyone always said I had his eyes. Pale, sharp, the color of unsaid things. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that had a condition attached. "You're going to be better than I ever was, Sillin," he told me. "You'll go further than Princeton. Wimbledon, maybe. You could be a legend." At 5, I didn't know what Wimbledon was. I did know that when he said legend, he meant extension of myself. He tossed a ball in front of me. I swung late, the racket dragging like a stubborn limb. The ball rolled away, escaping toward the fence. My father laughed, but there was no warmth in it. Again. That was the beginning. From then on, my life was divided into before practice, during practice, and recovering from practice. While other little girls at school talked about birthday parties and cartoons, my schedule revolved around lessons, clinics, drills. My father had a spreadsheet for my childhood. Hours in the gym, hours on court, hours watching footage of matches I didn't care about. Each cell was another brick in a prison nobody else could see. "Do you like it?" my mother would ask gently in the car. Her hands perfectly manicured on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road. There was only one acceptable answer. "Yes, Mom." She never asked a second time. The truth was, I liked movement. I liked the way my body felt when it was allowed to be more than a machine. At night, when the house went quiet and my muscles still buzzed with leftover energy, I'd sneak into the den and turn on the TV with the sound low. Music videos, dance shows, performances where people seemed to melt into rhythm. They weren't hitting balls, they were telling stories with their bodies. I'd stand in front of the screen and copy them, barefoot on the rug, trying to match the angles of elbows, the curves of spines, the way a turn could look like a question or an answer. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and move without thinking at all. In those moments, I didn't feel like an investment or a project. I felt like a person. If my father ever caught me, he'd shake his head. "Dancing?" he'd scoff. "That's not a sport, it's a hobby. You don't have time for hobbies, Sillin. Not if you want to be the best." He always said if, but it never sounded like a choice. By the time I was 10, the court felt more familiar than my own bedroom. The smell of clay, the bounce of the ball, the sting of the racket in my palm, these were normal. So were the critiques. "Your serve is weak. You're too slow on your feet. You're not focused. You're being dramatic." I learned early that pain was not to be mentioned. Pain was an accusation. Pain meant you weren't trying hard enough. I learned to swallow it whole. At 12, I played my first real tournament. The other girls had parents who sat quietly in the stands, clapping politely. My father prowled the fence line, barking directions like a general. Between sets, he'd grip my shoulders too hard and hiss instructions in my ear, oblivious to my trembling. "Don't you dare throw this away," he'd say. "Do you know how much we've spent on you?" On you. I was an investment with legs. We won that tournament. Or rather, I did. But the trophy went on his shelf, next to his own, Princeton, regional championships, framed photos of him in crisp white uniform, smiling the way he never smiled at me. At the small celebration dinner afterward, he gave a toast. "To potential," he said, raising his glass. "My daughter has it in spades." He loved potential. It meant he could still mold, still control, still take credit. What he never loved was reality. Messy. Imperfect. Alive. I tried to make myself smaller at those dinners, folding into my chair, listening to conversations about scholarships, rankings, connections. I would dream of a different kind of stage, one with music instead of scoreboards. At 14, I saw my first live dance performance. It was a contemporary piece at a small theater downtown, the kind of place my parents considered beneath them. A friend from school had a spare ticket. I lied and said I was studying at the library. Instead, I sat in the dark and watched strangers move like they were speaking a language I'd always known but never heard out loud. There was no ball to chase, no points to earn, just bodies spelling out emotions I didn't have words for: grief, rebellion, freedom. My throat ached the whole time as if I were holding back a scream. After the show, I went home and stood in front of my mirror. I tried to recreate one of the sequences I'd seen: a slow rise, a broken fall, a sudden twist. Tears blurred my reflection. I didn't know if I was crying from joy or mourning. The next day at breakfast, my father mentioned Princeton again, like a mantra he couldn't let go of. "When you're playing for Princeton, all this discipline will pay off," he said, buttering his toast like it was a deal he'd already signed. "You'll thank me someday." "I don't know if I want to play in college," I said carefully. "Maybe I could study something else, or—" I hesitated. "Or dance." The silence was instant and suffocating. My mother's knife froze halfway through a strawberry. My father slowly put down his coffee cup and looked at me as if I'd spoken in another language. "Dance," he repeated, each letter dipped in contempt. "It's just—" I tried again, feeling my pulse hammering in my throat. "I really love it. It makes me feel foolish," he cut in. "That's how it makes you feel. Dancing won't pay for your life, Cylin. Dancing won't get you into Princeton. Dancing won't give you stability. Do you have any idea how many girls want what you have?" Yes, I thought. A life that's actually mine. Aloud, I said nothing. He leaned forward. "Let me make something very clear. You have talent. You have access. You have a path I would have killed for at your age. I will not watch you throw it away on some frivolous fantasy. Do you understand?" I nodded. I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Because not nodding would have been war. From that moment, dance became a secret sin. Tennis was duty. Duty came first. The older I got, the harder the training became. Early morning runs, hours of serving drills, backhand, forehand, repeat until my arms felt like they might detach from my body. I started wrapping my wrists even when they didn't hurt, a preemptive apology to bones that never got to rest. By 16, I was ranked. My father knew the number better than I did. He recited it at parties, at dinners, to anyone who would listen. "My daughter is ranked top in the region. Princeton would be lucky to have her." No one ever asked if I wanted Princeton. Nobody asked if I wanted any of it. Sometimes after a long practice, I'd sneak into the old unused guest house at the edge of the property. The furniture was covered with white sheets like ghosts caught in mid-motion. In that forgotten space, I'd put on music from my phone and dance until my lungs burned. No technique, no corrections, no voice from the fence telling me I was too slow or too soft. In those moments, I met a different version of myself, one who didn't move to please anyone, who didn't flinch at every mistake. I liked her. I didn't know yet that she would save my life. Senior year came with a heavier weight than any serve. Princeton scouts began circling, watching my matches, taking notes. My father hovered around them like a salesman who knows his product isn't perfect, but is determined to make the sale anyway. "You keep your head straight, and this is yours," he told me after one match, clapping a hand on my shoulder so hard it hurt. "Scholarship, prestige, future. Don't mess this up." I stopped talking about dance altogether. In the weeks leading up to the crucial showcase match, the one that would all but decide my fate, my father intensified everything. Longer practices, shorter breaks, less food, more criticism. "You're sluggish," he'd say. "Do you want this or not? If you lose now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. You're not a child anymore. Pain is not an excuse." My wrist had started to ache more and more. Not the usual dull throb, but sharp stings when I served, little lightning bolts shooting up my arm. I wrapped it tighter, swallowed painkillers with my protein shakes, said nothing. The day before the scouts were scheduled to come, the sky was heavy with clouds. The air felt wrong, charged, like the moment before a storm or a confession. I was already exhausted when we stepped onto the court. 4 hours, my father said, glancing at his watch. Non-stop. We're pushing you to your limit today, and then tomorrow will feel easy. No breaks. Understood? 4 hours. No breaks. My body screamed in mute protest. My wrist pulsed like a second heart. I don't know if that's a good idea, I ventured. My wrist has been... He glared at me. Your wrist has been an excuse since you were 5. You're not injured, you're scared. There's a difference. Champions don't complain, they adapt. I'm not complaining, I'm just... Do you want Princeton or not? He snapped. The question lodged like a shard in my throat. I never wanted Princeton, but I wanted... something. His approval. A way out that didn't end in total exile. Let's start, I whispered. The first hour was a familiar kind of hell. Serves, returns, sprints. My shoes slid on the clay, sweat stung my eyes. My father's voice cut through every motion. Higher toss. Faster feet. Again. The second hour blurred. My wrist burned, each swing a small betrayal of my body. The pain grew fangs and dug in. By the third hour, I was moving on autopilot. The world narrowed to ball, racket, impact. My breath came ragged, my vision tunneling at the edges. Don't slow down, my father barked. You slow down now, you slow down tomorrow. Again. Something inside me broke at those words. Not physically, not yet. Some last thread of belief that he saw me as a person and not just a performance. But I swallowed it down, like I always did, and tossed the ball up for another serve. The sky had darkened. Thunder grumbled in the distance. I could feel the air thickening, the storm and my own breaking point racing each other. Last half hour, he called. Make it count. My arm felt like dead weight. Every toss was a negotiation with gravity. Every swing a war. I could barely feel my fingers on the grip. My wrist was no longer just pain, it was absence, a numbness creeping in. Again! He shouted as my serve clipped the net. I can't feel my hand, I said, my voice shaking. You don't need to feel it, you just need to use it, he shot back. Stop dramatizing. Toss, swing, follow through. I don't know why I listened. Habit, fear. The hope that if I did just one more, he would finally say, enough, I'm proud of you. I tossed the ball. Time slowed in that strange way it does before disaster. I saw the ball rise, a white blur against the darkening sky. I felt my shoulder rotate, my elbow extend. As my wrist snapped forward to strike, something inside it gave. The sound was small, a soft, wet crack, like a twig breaking under snow. Then came the pain, white-hot, blinding, all-consuming. The racket flew from my hand. The ball sailed nowhere. My knees buckled and I crumpled onto the clay, clutching my wrist as the world tilted. For a moment, there was no father, no court, no Princeton. Just the roaring of my pulse in my ears and the horrible certainty that something was very, very wrong. What the hell are you doing? My father's voice sliced through the haze. Get up, Silen. You don't lie down in the middle of a... I turned my wrist toward him. It was already swelling, the angle wrong, unnatural. Tears blurred my vision, spilling hot and helpless down my face. I heard something break, I gasped. It hurts. Dad, it really... His expression shifted. Annoyance, then calculation, then something like fear, quickly masked with anger. For God's sake, he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Fine. We're going to the hospital. But if this is just a sprain and you've thrown away a day of training... I barely heard the rest. The drive was a smear of pain and passing lights. In the sterile chill of the emergency room, a doctor with kind eyes and tired hands examined my wrist, sent me for x-rays, and then confirmed what my body already knew. It's a fracture, he said. A clean break, but a break nonetheless. She'll need a cast and rest. No impact, no strain, at least 6 to 8 weeks. 6 to 8 weeks. My father's silence was heavier than his shouting. The doctor kept talking physical therapy, possible long term sensitivity, the importance of listening to pain. I watched my father's jaw tighten with every word, his dreams rearranging themselves into a shape he didn't like. In the car on the way home, my wrist encased in plaster, I dared to ask, "What about tomorrow?" "The match?" he said, as if there might be another tomorrow on our calendar that mattered. "It's over." The words hung between us like a verdict. Over. The showcase, the scouts, the carefully laid plan. I stared out the window as the house grew closer, its lights gleaming like teeth. My chest felt hollow and crowded at the same time. "I'm sorry," I whispered. My father's hands tightened on the wheel. "Sorry doesn't change anything." My mother met us at the door, her face pale, eyes wide as she took in the cast. "Oh, sweetheart," she breathed, finally reaching for me, but my father stepped between us. "She broke it," he said flatly. "Pushed past her limit and broke it, right before everything we worked for." We? As if I'd never had a say. That night, they didn't talk about Princeton. They talked about wasted effort, lost opportunities, bad timing. Not once did they ask how I felt. Not once did they say, "You're hurt." Rest. In the weeks that followed, the house grew colder than the cast around my wrist. I was no longer an asset in motion. I was a reminder of failure. The silence around me was heavier than any shouted criticism. I missed the match. The scouts moved on. Princeton stopped returning calls. One evening, I came downstairs and heard my parents arguing in the study, their voices sharp and low. "She threw it away," my father was saying. "All the training, all the money." "She's our daughter," my mother murmured, but her voice lacked conviction. He snorted. "She was our daughter when she was winning. Now she's a liability. We can't keep pouring resources into someone who doesn't deliver." I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure they'd hear it. A liability, not a child. A sunk cost. Later that week, my father called me into the dining room. The table was empty except for 3 manila folders. One had my name on it. "We've made a decision," he said. Oh, he laid it out like a business proposal. He would no longer be paying for extra coaching, clinics, tournaments. Without Princeton on the horizon, there was no justification for the level of investment they'd made. "You've made your choice, whether you meant to or not," he said. "You broke. Literally. We can't build on that." "I didn't choose to break my wrist," I whispered. He gave me a look I'd seen him reserve for incompetent employees. "You chose not to be stronger." My mother sat beside him, her eyes fixed on a spot on the table. I realized she'd perfected the art of looking at nothing when something unbearable was happening. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice small. "You'll finish high school," he said. "You can figure out what comes next after that, but not here. Not like this. It's disruptive." "Not here?" The room spun. "What do you mean, not here?" My mother finally spoke, her voice so soft it was almost a sigh. "Your grandmother has offered to take you in for a while. Just until you find your footing." "Grandma?" I repeated, stunned. My father's mother, the one they always treated like an embarrassing relic from a poorer past. I loved her in the quiet, guilty way you love someone your parents mock. "She thinks it would be good for you," my mother added quickly. "Less pressure. A simpler life." My father folded his hands. "It will also give us space to reset. We can't keep living like this. Constant disappointment. Constant tension. It's not sustainable." I looked from one to the other. "You're sending me away." "We're giving you a chance," he corrected. "Somewhere you won't be reminded of what you threw away." I opened my mouth to protest. to beg, to argue that I could do something else, be someone else, stay. But the words died. Because suddenly I realized something terrifying. I didn't want to stay. Not in this house. Not in this life measured only by what I could win. Still, the rejection carved itself into my ribs. So that's it, I said. I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm just excess inventory. My mother flinched. My father's gaze hardened. Don't be dramatic, Sillin. You made your choice when you broke. We're simply adjusting. Adjusting. That night, I packed my own suitcase. Not the one they'd prepared, stripped of everything that mattered, but a small, battered one my grandmother had given me years before. I filled it with more dance clothes than tennis gear, more notebooks than trophies. As I zipped it closed, my cast throbbed in time with my heartbeat. Something was breaking and healing at the same time. I didn't know it yet, but walking out of that house would be the first true dance step of my life. The day I moved in with my grandmother, the world suddenly felt human again. Her house stood at the far end of a quiet street in Trenton, a single-story building with lilac bushes that had long ago given up, pretending to bloom in neat shapes. The paint peeled at the edges of the porch, the floorboards creaked, and the air smelled of cinnamon and laundry soap. It was the opposite of my parents' glass mansion. Warm where theirs was cold, imperfect where theirs was flawless, alive where theirs was embalmed. Shoes off, Grandma said as I stepped inside. This floor has heard enough heavy steps for one lifetime. Her name was Lauren May Davenport, but everyone called her Miss Lauren. The irony didn't occur to me until years later, when I would borrow her name to build my own legend. Back then, she was simply safety wrapped in wrinkles. She didn't ask about my wrist or about the silence that seemed to trail me like a second shadow. She just poured tea, set a plate of shortbread cookies between us, and said, "You look tired, honey. Let's feed the tired first. The words can wait." For the first time in months, I didn't have to perform exhaustion as strength. I could just be tired. That evening, as rain tapped against the windows, she turned on an old record player. A low, crackling jazz melody filled the small living room. She hummed, swaying a little, hips light as memory. "You dance?" she asked. The question startled me. My parents never asked that word out loud. "I used to," I said quietly. "Well," she said, nodding toward the rug. "You still can. The living room's as good a studio as any." I stared at her, waiting for the lecture that would never come. When she saw that I wasn't moving, she chuckled. "You don't have to impress anyone here, child. Just breathe in the rhythm and let it come out however it wants." It took weeks before I did. Healing, it turned out, was less like fixing and more like remembering what wasn't broken. The first months with Grandma blurred into gentle routine. She worked mornings at a small flower shop, and I helped after school, sweeping petals off the counter and learning the names of colors I'd never noticed before: cerulean, mauve, viridian. At night, we'd cook dinner together, simple meals that smelled like forgiveness. Sometimes she'd catch me watching dance clips on her old desktop computer. She never commented, never asked if I missed tennis. She simply let the silence between us stretch until it became comfortable. My wrist healed before my heart did. Even after the cast came off, I flinched whenever someone mentioned competition. I couldn't hold a racket without hearing the echo of my father's voice. But one afternoon, while dusting the shelves, I found a VHS tape labeled Trenton Community Dance Recital 1989. On a whim, I slid it into the player. The footage was grainy, children spinning awkwardly on stage, adults clapping too loudly. But in the middle of it was a younger version of my grandmother, barefoot in a flowing skirt, leading a group through a modern routine. Her movements were untrained, raw, full of joy. When she walked into the room and saw me watching, she laughed softly. "We used to have a little dance club down at the community center. Lord, we were terrible, but we had fun." "You danced," I said, still staring at the screen. "I lived," she corrected. "Dancing was just how we said thank you." That night, while she slept, I cleared a space in the living room. The moonlight fell in rectangles across the floorboards. I pressed play on the same record she'd used that first evening. My wrist trembled, unsure. My feet remembered before my mind did. Step, turn, breath. The body doesn't forget truth even when it's punished for speaking it. Over the next year, I began taking classes at the community center. It wasn't the glossy world of studios and scholarships, just a mix of teenagers, retirees, and a few lost souls like me. The mirrors were cracked, the floor uneven, but no one shouted. No one timed my worth with a stopwatch. The first time the instructor, a wiry woman named Carmen Lee, asked me to improvise, I froze. "Don't think," she said gently. "Thinking is a spectator sport? Feel. Where does it hurt? Start there." So I did. I moved the way memories moved. Hesitant, fractured, then furious. Every lunge was an argument I'd never been allowed to finish. Every turn, a refusal to collapse. When the music stopped, I realized I was crying. Carmen didn't say good job. She handed me a towel and said, "That's the real stuff. Keep digging." Week by week, movement replaced medication. I stopped waking up with my jaw clenched. I started sleeping without dreams of rackets and fences. Grandma watched every small transformation with quiet pride. She'd leave notes on the fridge. "Remember to eat. Proud of you even when you trip. Every bruise means you're alive." When she wasn't looking, I'd pocket the notes like Lucky Charms. After graduation, I didn't go to college. My parents didn't call, didn't offer, didn't ask. Grandma said, "You don't need a campus to find purpose," and slipped a $100 bill into my pocket for bus fare. I moved to Philadelphia and enrolled in an intensive dance program that cost more than we could afford. I worked nights at a cafe, mornings at a thrift store, afternoons in rehearsal. My feet blistered, my bank account bled, but my soul stretched open like a window after years of being nailed shut. Those years were brutal and holy. I learned technique, anatomy, choreography. I learned what it meant to fail in front of people who understood failure as process, not punishment. I learned to fall on purpose and make it look like flight. I started performing in small showcases, then slightly bigger ones. Critics began to notice the girl who danced like she was exercising something. My name appeared in programs, but it never felt safe. Silent Davenport still tasted like their world. I wanted to be untouchable, untraceable. The first time I introduced myself as Cy Lauren, it was almost a joke. Cy for the nickname Grandma used when she called me my little Cy, and Lauren for her. But when the host announced it on stage, "Please welcome the captivating Cy Lauren," something clicked. The audience applauded for a name unburdened by history. I bowed, and for the first time, I felt born. After that, I signed every poster Cy Lauren. Each letter was a brick in the wall between me and the Davenports. When Grandma got sick, I was 25 and touring with a modern company on the West Coast. The phone call came after a performance in Los Angeles. The stage lights were still warm on my skin when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. "This is Dr. Nguyen," the voice said. "Your grandmother asked us to contact you. She wanted to make sure you knew she's comfortable." Comfortable, that cruel hospital word. I flew home the next morning. The flower shop was closed, a for sale sign in the window. The house smelled of lavender and antiseptic. Grandma lay in her bed by the window, thinner but radiant in the way people get when they've already made peace with everything. "Well," she said when she saw me, "look at you, all grown and glittering." "Don't talk like that," I said, sitting beside her. "You're going to finish my dance," she interrupted softly. "Everyone does." We spent 3 weeks together. We watched old movies, drank weak tea, talked about everything except endings. On her last night, she reached for my hand. "I know you think you're dancing to prove them wrong," she whispered. "But someday you'll dance to prove yourself right. That's when you'll be free." She died before dawn. The world was quiet for a long time after that. The inheritance wasn't much. A small insurance payout, a few thousand in savings, the deed to the house. But it was enough to build something that mattered. I sold the house, but kept the record player. With the money, I rented a decrepit warehouse in Brooklyn. Cracked walls, leaking roof, perfect acoustics. The first night I walked through it, dust swirling in the beam of my flashlight, I imagined a stage right in the middle. No seats, no distance between performer and viewer. A place where movement could confess without judgment. I called it the Lauren Project. At first, it was just me and a handful of other misfits. Street dancers, ballet dropouts, survivors of their own small wars. We rehearsed with gloves in winter, buckets catching rainwater between our steps. But something happened in that cold. We built warmth out of exhaustion, trust out of imperfection. Our first piece, Fracture, told the story of a girl whose wrist breaks mid-performance, forcing her to reinvent her movement. The critics called it visceral and painfully honest. They didn't know it was autobiography. They didn't know I still wrapped my wrist before every show, more ritual than necessity. Success came slowly, then all at once. A viral video. An invitation to perform at a charity gala in Chicago. A feature in The New Yorker. Within 2 years, C. Loren was no longer just a dancer. She was a symbol. Magazines loved the mystery, the hidden identity, the masked performances, the refusal to speak of her past. A goddess of rebirth, one article called me. I read it and laughed until I cried. Fame was strange. It wasn't loud. It was precise. Doors opened. Patrons donated. Wealthy strangers told me my work moved them. They had no idea it had been born from the kind of pain they paid therapists to forget. Still, I didn't hate them. I used their money to grow the theater, to fund scholarships for kids who couldn't afford classes. The project became a sanctuary for the broken, the restless, the ones who needed to turn survival into something beautiful. Each performance was a confession, each applause a small resurrection. Every Christmas, my parents mailed a generic holiday card to my grandmother's address, unaware that she was gone and that I was the one receiving them. The cards were stiff, perfunctory, signed Charles and Evelyn Davenport. No return address, just the Princeton crest embossed in gold. I never replied, but I kept them all in a box. Sometimes late at night, I'd read them aloud to the empty studio, my voice echoing off the walls. Merry Christmas from the proud parents of... They never filled in the blank. Those cards became props in one of my later pieces. The unsent letters. On stage, dancers moved among falling paper, catching envelopes, tearing them open, reading invisible words. The audience wept. I smiled behind my mask. By 32, I was touring internationally. Paris, Tokyo, São Paulo. Every city felt like a new skin. Journalists wanted to know where I came from. I told them stories that were true in spirit, if not in fact. Born in movement, raised by rhythm, citizen of nowhere. They loved the mystery, but fame carries its own silence. After each standing ovation, after the glitter and champagne, I would return to my hotel room, wash off the paint, and see the same eyes in the mirror, the ones that looked like his. I thought about confronting them sometimes. Thought about walking up to their pristine door and saying, "Look what I became without you." But that felt too small, too private. I wanted truth, not just revenge. I wanted to burn their illusion in public daylight. The opportunity came wrapped in irony and gold stationery. A letter from the Princeton Heritage Foundation, signed by the same two names that had signed my exile. The night before I agreed to their invitation, I stood alone in the theater. The lights were off. The city beyond the windows pulsed like a slow heartbeat. I placed the record player in the center of the stage and let Grandma's old jazz records spin. The crackle filled the air like distant rain. "Are you watching, Grandma?" I whispered. "Because I think the final act is coming." I began to move. Not rehearsed choreography, just breath and memory. Every step was a chapter. The child gripping a racket, the girl hiding in the guest house, the woman reborn in dust and sweat. I felt them merge, becoming whole for the first time. When the song ended, I was crying and laughing at once. I looked at my wrist. It still bore the faint white scar from the fracture. I traced it with my fingertip like a signature. "I'm ready," I said, into the empty room. Ready not just to face them, but to show them. to make the stage the same weapon they once used against me, to turn obedience into revelation. I locked the theater, walked into the night, and for the first time in my life, the air didn't smell like fear. It smelled like electricity, like the beginning of a storm I would finally choose. The gala was held at the Princeton Heritage Hall, a building that looked as if someone had tried to trap eternity in marble. Columns, chandeliers, champagne fountains, money pretending to be grace. From the outside, it glittered. From the inside, it suffocated. I had not seen this place since I was 18. My driver opened the door and the flash of cameras spilled into the car like lightning. Miss Lauren, see Lauren, over here! Journalists shouted questions about the performance, my next tour, my rumored film project. No one asked about the Davenports. They didn't know they were walking into their own confession. I stepped onto the red carpet wrapped in a silver gown that caught the light like water. My hair was slicked back beneath a thin veil of metallic lace. The mask, my signature piece, covered the upper half of my face, painted with streaks of silver and white that shimmered like tears frozen mid-fall. To the world, I looked untouchable. To myself, I looked armed. Inside, the hall buzzed with the sounds of wealth trying to entertain itself. Crystals chimed. Laughter floated. Waiters moved like ghosts between tables. I walked through it all, every click of my heel a metronome counting down to judgment. And then I saw them. My parents stood near the stage exactly as I remembered. Immaculate, unyielding, rehearsed. My father's hair had gone gray, but his posture was still perfect. Back straight as a promise never kept. My mother wore emeralds, the same color as the tennis courts of my childhood. Her smile was poised, her eyes scanning the room for importance. They didn't recognize me, not yet. When the event coordinator introduced me, their applause was genuine. My father even whispered to the man beside him, proud to have secured the impossible. If irony had a heartbeat, it would have matched mine. The performance was called Inheritance. No one knew what it meant, just that C. Loren was about to unveil something new, something never before seen. The stage was minimal, a single spotlight, a wooden chair, a porcelain bowl filled with water, and a thin white cloth draped over the backrest. The orchestra was silent. Everything else was me. As the lights dimmed, a hush rippled through the audience. I stepped into the circle of light barefoot, my reflection caught in the water's still surface. The opening note, a single cello string vibrating like a pulse, filled the room. I began slowly. A reach, a recoil. A step forward, 2 steps back. Each movement deliberate, restrained, as though I were trying to hold up the weight of invisible hands pushing me down. The crowd watched, mesmerized. They saw the discipline, the elegance. They didn't see the memories stitched into every gesture, the bruises of routine, the hours of forced perfection, the child learning to move not for joy, but for approval. At the 10-minute mark, the music shifted. Drums entered. A steady, relentless rhythm, echoing the sound of tennis balls against clay. I moved faster now, arms slicing through the air, body twisting with precision that bordered on violence. The rhythm built, harder, louder, until it felt like an argument between bone and breath. And then I stopped. Silence. The kind that roars. In the spotlight, I reached for the bowl of water and poured it over my head. Silver paint began to run down my face, dripping onto the floor, pooling at my feet. Gasps rippled through the hall. No one expected the mask to dissolve. My skin beneath was bare, my features familiar, yet hidden by time. I looked straight at my parents, my father's expression faltered. My mother's hand went to her throat. Still, they didn't speak. Not yet. I bent down, lifted the microphone from the stage floor, and held it loosely, as if it might bite. When I was 5, I began, someone put a racket in my hand and told me it was love. A nervous laugh rippled from a few confused guests. This is not a story about tennis, I said softly. It's a story about ownership. I told them, calmly, clinically, about the drills, the perfectionism, the fracture, the exile. I didn't use names, not at first. I let the story hang between us like a portrait slowly revealing its subjects. I was told that breaking was failure. I was told that pain was weakness. I was told that silence was grace. My eyes found my father's. But I learned that breaking is birth. I let the microphone drop to my side. The music resumed, low, haunting. Behind me, a projection appeared on the curtain. An old photograph from a long ago newspaper article. Charles Davenport with daughter, junior tennis champion. Someone in the audience gasped. My father's name echoed like an accusation. I turned back to the crowd. That was me, the daughter he erased. My mother's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering against the marble floor. No one moved to clean it. I picked up the white cloth from the chair. It was the same kind my grandmother used to dry her hands after gardening. With it, I wiped the remaining paint from my face. Each stroke revealed more of myself. Not the myth, not the brand, but the woman underneath. No costume, no armor, just the truth. I built my life, I said, from what they threw away. The music swelled again, violin and drums intertwining like memory and defiance. I began to dance. Not the polished precision of Cy Lauren performances, but something raw, closer to the earth. A dance of refusal, of rebirth. I moved across the stage like someone reclaiming the ground beneath her feet. The audience was silent. Even the cameras had stopped clicking. Somewhere near the front row, my father whispered something to my mother. She shook her head slowly, eyes glistening. When the final note died, I stood in stillness. My breath was audible, my chest rising and falling with exhaustion and relief. The spotlight dimmed until it was only a faint halo around me. Then I said, "My name is Ceylin Davenport." A single gasp, sharp as glass, cut through the hall. My father's jaw clenched. My mother's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. No applause. Just the rustle of disbelief, the murmur of realization. I looked directly at them, the way a surgeon might look at a wound before stitching it closed. For years, I said, I danced to forget you. Tonight, I danced to remember that I survived you. My voice didn't tremble, it didn't need to. My father took a step forward, then stopped, as if the space between us were filled with invisible walls built from every unspoken word. "Ceylin," he said quietly. It was the first time I'd heard my name from his mouth in 16 years. It sounded smaller than I remembered. "You taught me that weakness was unforgivable," I said. "But look at you now. You can't even stand up straight under the weight of truth." He flinched. My mother reached for his arm, but he shook her off. "I thought we were doing what was best," she murmured. Her voice cracked on the last word. "I know," I said softly. "That's what makes it worse." For a moment, none of us moved. The hall was still, the guests frozen in the strange intimacy of someone else's reckoning. Then I bowed, not to them, but to the audience, to the ghosts who had followed me here, to the girl I used to be. The spotlight went dark. Backstage, the noise returned. Whispers, questions, footsteps, confusion. My assistant Maya was waiting with wide eyes. "Are you okay?" she asked, handing me a towel. "I'm free," I said simply. Through the curtain, I could hear the MC stumbling through a closing statement about art as catharsis. People began to clap, uncertain at first, then louder, longer, until the hall shook with it. They weren't applauding scandal, they were applauding release. Later that night, alone in the dressing room, I peeled off the last remnants of silver from my skin. Underneath, the faint scar on my wrist caught the light. I kissed it, an old habit, and whispered, "We did it." My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Ceylin, please, can we talk?" "Dad." I stared at it for a long time. Then I deleted it. The headlines arrived before sunrise. Dancer C. Lauren revealed as disowned daughter of Princeton elite. The performance that shook the room. Pundits debated whether it was brave or cruel. Critics called it a masterpiece of truth. I didn't read most of them. I was tired of other people defining my story. I spent the morning walking through the city, barefaced, anonymous. The world didn't recognize me without the mask, and for once, that anonymity felt like luxury. At a cafe, a young woman approached shyly. "Were you at the gala last night?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she whispered. "My mom's like your dad. I saw what you did, and I—" Her voice broke. "I think I can leave." She left before I could answer. I sat there shaking, realizing that revenge had quietly turned into something else. Permission. A week later, I returned to Grandma's grave. The headstone was simple. Lauren Mae Davenport, who taught flowers to dance. I placed the broken porcelain bowl from the performance at its base. Rain started to fall, soft and persistent. "I finished it," I said aloud. "The dance you talked about. The one that proves me right." The wind carried the scent of lilacs, the kind that never bloomed properly but always tried. For the first time, I felt no anger, just gravity and peace. 3 months later, I premiered a new piece at the Lauren Project. It was called Homecoming. No masks, no projections, just 6 dancers, barefoot, moving through beams of light that shifted like memories. When the curtain fell, I stepped forward to speak. The audience waited for something grand, maybe a statement about redemption. Instead, I said, "Sometimes you don't get closure. You get continuation. You learn to dance without waiting for applause." The crowd rose in silence. Then applause thundered. Warm, human, real. As I bowed, I thought of my parents. Not with rage, but with distance. They were just people who mistook control for love. And I was the woman who turned their mistake into movement. When the lights dimmed, I stayed alone on stage, staring at the empty seats. The floor beneath me was warm from dancing, the air full of dust that glittered like stars. For the first time, I didn't need the mask, the fame, or the pain to define me. I had become my own inheritance, and as the house lights went out, I whispered to the darkness, "I am still dancing."